area, right? Hey, I'm not going to short you there, Phil. We got the idea from you, so
I got
I ain't going to short you in that category, man.
I at least get to keep the first daily sports morning show in Philadelphia. I will always have that title. Before the bigger networks were doing the morning show, this guy was doing the daily morning show. Just so you know, I was the first one, and I traded DSM for PSN. But you know what, DSM, you, Scotty, Dylan, you guys always will have a special place in my heart. So, you know, anytime you guys need me, you know I'm always here for you.
Likewise, Phil. We got a special bond, and that will never separate.
Me and you, I don't know about you, but I actually like a month ago went back to the original like Scotty Talks, like the first few episodes you did, and I was on one. Man, first off, that thing had huge views, but secondly, like, dude, we're literally still talking about the same exact stuff 3 years later.
It is crazy that we're still talking about. I think the only thing you could subtract from the equation is literally Ben Simmons. That's the only part of this that you could probably subtract. And now you can subtract Doc Rivers, but obviously him getting fired, he's not out of the woodwork yet, for sure. So it is interesting to see us back here once again after a second round exit, talking some Sixers basketball. Let's dive right into it, man. I want to first start right there at the second round exit. Obviously, I think at one point during the playoffs, just based off your tweets, we were on opposite ends of the spectrum, just because you were thinking this team isn't that much different from the teams before. And in hindsight, you were probably right in that case. I know at some point you had shifted over just because I think they all fooled us in that game 5 against Boston and kind of got us to buy back in. But nonetheless, what are your thoughts coming off another second round exit, coming off a season where Embiid wins MVP finally, right? He gets that accolade that we thought he's deserved for several years now. And then, of course, Doc Rivers getting banned at the end. So how are we feeling, man?
It's been a few weeks since the season ended now. Like, yeah. I've had time for my emotions to kind of settle down and just, let it marinate my thoughts a little bit. I did a couple other guest spots like right when the season ended, and I was fired up. I was pissed off. I don't know about you, but now after a couple of weeks, it's kind of like subsided. But I still go back to, I know me and you and a couple other people got into it because I forget what game it was where we blew that, where we got like something big happened right before halftime. And we went from being 2 down to like being like 10 down, like in a little spur moment. I tweeted out the season ended at that moment because we let our foot off the pedal, and everybody came at me for that, whatever. But there's just, and it also came at that Boston where I said after winning game 1, we had to win game 2 too. It was more important than people realized. Yeah. And everyone's like, no, it's okay to lose game 2 because losing game 2, you still get the split, whatnot. And what I do is I go back to the culture that Doc Rivers created here in Philly. Like accepting a game 2 loss. It's okay to lose game 2. That's that losing culture. And if I thought that moment before halftime, where we went from being down 3 to being down 10 was a turning point of the season, I actually then thought going back to that moment early in the season when Doc Rivers said that was a scheduled loss, and I don't remember what game it was, but it was very early in the season.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Doc Rivers had, given these players an acceptable losing mentality. And I think we knew the outcome of this season, at least I did, from that moment. And it's okay to lose should never be the mentality. And Doc Rivers is gone, and we're going to get into Nick Nurse in the future. Yeah. The biggest challenge going forward is your big stars, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, whether Tobias is here or not, whatever. We'll get into that. How Nick Nurse changes that acceptable losing mentality. And when then Joel Embiid decides not to give 100% one game, does Nick Nurse accept that? Or does Nick Nurse put his foot down? Because we can go to Brett Brown. We've not had accountability in this city on this team since day one. And so, like, we lost in the second round again. It sucks. But we should have just expected it. Because that is what this team and this culture this team has had for a really long time.
Yeah. I think you're spot on. As always, I should say, right there, Phil. Because
Sometimes I'm a little off.
Hey, I gotta build you up, man. I gotta build you up. You're a guest on the show. You got to be right all the time. Otherwise, why have you? But no,
I'm wrong.
I'm kidding.
Most people tell me I'm wrong 99% of the time. So there ain't nothing surprising there. I'm always told I'm wrong.
It's interesting though, the way you phrase it, because it's a great thing to point back to, especially in hindsight, when you look at some of these games. Right, you go and you blow the game too, and it's not looked at in the moment maybe as a big deal, aside from just the few that saw it the way you saw it. But then you get to game 6, and it's like, okay, we have a chance to close the Boston Celtics out in this game at home. And so by the end of the game, obviously we're pissed off that they don't finish it off. But I think some Sixers fans were even able to work themselves back into the Sixers winning game 7. I'll put myself out there. I was one of those fans that thought they could. Didn't think that they necessarily will go out there and win, but thought they could win in Boston. And, as I should have expected, as you just said, they go out there and they don't even show up for the game in the second half of that game 7. So you go back to game 6 and it's like, oh, well, they were in position to win the series. They still have a chance. Look at the Miami Heat, for instance, right? They're up 3-0 on the Celtics and it gets back to 3-3. They go into Boston. They take care of business because they know what they're doing. And the Sixers weren't able to do it. And now, like you said, the question marks shift. Doc Rivers is gone. But the thing that stuck out like a sore thumb in this playoff run was Embiid struggling, right? And especially in that second round series, towards the end of it, the last 2 games specifically where you needed him most, the question marks go directly towards him. And then obviously James Harden, he has 2 out of 7 great games, right? In that series, and he's getting boasted up, but the question marks rely with him as well. He's got to be held accountable there as well. And obviously guys like Tobias, and you can go down the list, of course. But now with Nick Nurse, and I think you kind of hinted towards that, the writing's on the wall. So there's no more excuses. There's no more coaches to run through for specifically Joel Embiid. And I think that's the biggest thing coming out of this season. He's got something to prove. And, it's crazy to say that coming off an MVP season, right?
It's really crazy. And I think it's very important in telling that Joel Embiid was in the interview process for Nick. I really think that's important because, yes, people are not joking, but people are theorizing trading Joel or not, that kind of stuff. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But if there was any inkling that was going to happen, Joel Embiid wouldn't have been involved in that conversation. It's not easy. I don't know if you've ever been on a losing sports team, like a really bad team in your life growing up. It's just loss after loss after.
Yeah.
Pretty much every sports team I've ever played on is a losing team. I don't think I've ever had a playoff game in any sport that I ever played growing up. But it's really hard.
Yeah.
When you're used to losing. Like, I'll just go, the last thing I did, I played in an adult men's softball league, and we were the worst team in the league, above and beyond. And it was just acceptable. Like, we just knew. We tried to compete. We weren't good enough. And then by year 2 or 3 of this team, hell, we were getting drunk before the games.
Yeah,
it was just a league, whatever. But there's prize money on the line for this league.
Yeah.
Like, we just accepted that we were going to lose, so we cared less and less every year instead of trying to care more and breaking that feeling. Like, Joel Embiid wants to win. Joel Embiid cares about his legacy. This whole season was about legacies.
Yeah.
Well, now Joel Embiid's legacy is still on the line.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Nick Nurse does. I don't know how Nick Nurse sits Joel Embiid down and says, we won't accept this. When Joel Embiid has a game where he's got 7 straight missed 3-point shots or turning the ball over or whatnot, does Nick Nurse have the guts to sit him down and say, that's not acceptable?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I am so far confused on how this is going to play out with Nick Nurse, because everything you read about Nick Nurse from Toronto, and I got a guy, Esfandiari Barahini, he writes for the Score, but he's also a guy that covers the Raptors. And as soon as Nick Nurse was hired, I DM'd him like, yo, my man, what are your thoughts? I know you can't come on the show. Give me your thoughts. He's like, the question will be, how quickly he will wear out his welcome in Philly when he tries to hold Joel Embiid accountable. That was exactly what he texted me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I mean, will Joel Embiid buy in or will he not?
Yeah.
And I don't know.
See, that's an interesting point you bring up too about the teams and the losing and how that can build. It can almost build a rhythm to losing, right? That algorithm, and it's hard to get out of that algorithm once you're in it. And I see what you mean with Joel Embiid. And see, when I left this series or this playoff run, I was thinking along the lines of, man, look at Joel Embiid after that Game 7 loss, and he's going up and patting Jason Tatum on the back. And I know they're buddies. Know they train with Drew Hanlon. I know they have those connections, but still, it's just not what you want to see after you just go and you blow a 3-2 lead in the series. It's not just blowing the Game 7. So that was disappointing from that point. And so then, obviously, I'm deep in my thoughts after a miserable loss at the end of the season.
Right.
I'm sitting here thinking, like, man, we have two guys at the top that just don't have it. They don't have the heart they don't have the love for the game to the point where they won't accept somebody being better than them in that game. Like, I took it back to, we're talking about old teams in sports we used to play in. Take it back to when I was in high school playing basketball myself. And I remember going to the semis for states, and we're in the semis, and it's this team. I think they were called Ellicott City. They were Ellicott City from Baltimore. We're from this small Hagerstown at the western side of Maryland, and we're not even supposed to be there, right? Like we're there. We're having fun. We're at the Comcast. It was called the Comcast Center. It's Xfinity now. For the Maryland Terrapins, their arena, and so we get there, and I just remember having this mindset. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't like scared. I didn't have this thought in my mind, even with the odds against us, that we're going to go out here and lose. Like, that's not in my head when I go into a game. And I was just like, man, what gives me that? What gave me that confidence and that, that just lack of fear, that courage, right? That bravery to go out there and compete and try to win. And I would never go up and pat. Like, I'll shake hands. I'm not that much of a sore loser because they used to force you. But I promise you, if I was in an NBA atmosphere, I'm walking straight back to the locker room because I'm pissed. Like, there's no way I'm going up and shaking hands at that moment. Maybe I congratulate him later down the road, text Jason Tatum or something, whatever. I'm not going and doing that in front of my fans and in front of the nation. And what that showed me, it was almost just like a content feeling in him. It looked like a very content Joel Embiid walking away from there. And it made me think, like, did he get the MVP in that second round in what, game 2 or game 3 it was back home in Philly? And was he just okay, right? Like, he got the game 5 win, Harden goes off, and it's just like, it's okay, right? I don't need to win this series. I don't need to get to the third round this year. I don't need to get to the Eastern Conference Finals because I finally won the MVP. I achieved that accolade. We'll go at it next year. And that's what worries me. Just that bit of just relaxedness or content. It doesn't satisfy me, and it shouldn't satisfy, the Sixers organization either from that standpoint. I want to shout out Brett here. He's in the comments.
The one thing he's saying there, if he would have gotten ripped if he pouted and went off the court, is his third comment there. I actually think after a best-of-7 series, the handshakes that they do in hockey and in basketball and all that stuff, honestly, I know it makes me sound unsportsmanlike. I hate it. Like, I never liked it. Like, I think it's just I just think you should be done. Just walk off the court. If you got to do a media appearance, you do. But I want to go back to what you said a few moments ago about you playing in that, semifinals, and you didn't go in scared or thinking you were going to lose. And you said you don't know what made you think that. It wasn't your coach that season or that day. Doc Rivers didn't blow Game 7 against the Celtics. Right. Doc Rivers blew it at the beginning of the year. Doc Rivers blew it 2 years ago. Brett Brown blew the Game 7 against Boston was partially Brett Brown's fault 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Yeah. Who was the coach at Kansas when Joel Embiid was there? Was it still Bill Self?
Had to be Bill Self, yeah. He's been there for a while.
Nobody has held people like Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid accountable. I know you said we're moving on from Ben Simmons, but
Always find a way. Hey,
it's always part of the topic. No one's
part of
held these
history.
guys accountable. Even James Harden to an extent. Who's ever held these guys accountable?
Yeah.
You look at the guys that are winning every single year. You look at Boston culture. You look at Miami culture. What's his name? Eric Spoelstra holds every player accountable. I don't care if your name's Jimmy Butler or who. Always held accountable.
Yeah.
And that's what's up, my man, Marshawn? I love you, my man.
Hey, I'm not saying that I agree with this comment by any means. I'm not ready to trade Joel, but there is a reality where this is the case. And I mean, that's what we're talking about right now. That is the reality that we're speaking of. Is Joel, is he not made to be the number one? And then that leads me to the next conversation, right, which is James Harden. I can't bring him back on a max contract because he's not a number one either, right? Like, he's not a guy in those moments either. And so I'll get out in front of you here. I think when you look at this situation right now, it's very complicated. And I know we're going to go through a ton of names tonight that should be thought about when it comes to this team and roster makeup. But Tyrese Maxey, is our only hope left that Tyrese Maxey can be that guy? Right. Instead of bringing in a bunch of other outside guys from outside the organization, maybe Tyrese Maxey is that guy when you give him the keys. And that's something I think we have to consider exploring, especially if you're Daryl Morey and you're thinking about, do I give Harden this much money, that much money? You have to think about all of these things. So brings me to the next topic. Where are you at with James Harden?
Well, I kind of before I say James Harden specifically, and shout out to Marshall, because he's always on the morning show comment. I think it was him that said, backtracking to Joel Embiid and James Harden, I think Marshawn was the one that said that Joel Embiid can be the guy, but he needs to be the number one, but have a real number one that takes over in crunch time. Yeah, he's the best player on the court, but needs a killer for crunch time. And Joel Embiid is a great player. He's one of the best basketball players in the NBA, no doubt about it. But he doesn't have that killer mentality for the end of the game. So he needs a number two. I think the way it was phrased exactly in the show, Joel Embiid needs a number two that could become the number one in crunch time.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
James Harden is not that guy. Not at all. And so, I think we've seen that.
So that leads me to, when you're thinking about Joel and you're thinking about, how everything plays out over the regular season. And, this is something that I've kind of come out of. I don't know if I was in a daze over the last 3 seasons because you get so caught up in the MVP talk and Joel being at the top of the scoring list and, all of these things, these personal accolades for Joel. But then you get to the postseason, he's double, triple teamed sometimes. They're throwing these complex defenses at him, these complex looks, and they're making everybody else come out here and beat them. Maybe you have to change your approach during the regular season as well, right? You can't run every single offensive possession through Joel, and you definitely can't do it out by the three-point line, man. That's just the simple truth of the situation. So let me ask you this before we do move to James Harden, because I'm curious on your thoughts. I think we've discussed this before. I think there's a world where, Joel, you scale it down to 25 to 27 points per game, not 30 plus, and you focus on defense and rebounding every single game, because you talked about those games where he shoots and misses 7 straight three-pointers. That's frustrating as hell to watch. It's got to be frustrating to coach as well. Your big man just pulling up from 3. But then on top of that, you'll have the games where Joel has 5 rebounds. That can't happen. That just can't happen for a team that is at the bottom of the league in rebounding.
So here's where I'm at with it. What do you think gives you a better chance to win an NBA title? MVP Joel Embiid averaging 33 and 10, whatever it may be, or defensive player of the year, Joel Embiid, which he is capable of being. And I think at some point before some season, the last couple of years, he said that was going to be his goal. Would a 24 point a game, Joel Embiid averaging 13, 14 rebounds, 2 blocks a game, being the defensive player of the year, does that give you a better chance of winning the MVP or winning the NBA title? I think Joel Embiid dominating as a defensive player of the year even candidate get you that NBA title, because that's also going to mean Maxey's used to, being in that role. Whoever the other star is,
exactly,
being in that scoring role. Big men just don't dominate the way Joel Embiid does anymore. And you look at it, Jokic is a different cat, a different story.
Yeah.
But he plays differently than Joel Embiid. And I don't know. I don't think you win with 33 point a game, Joel Embiid, win an NBA title, that is. You're going to win 50 games a year in the regular season, but you're not going to win an NBA title that way.
Yeah, and see, I would say the difference between him and Jokic is that other teams have to approach Jokic differently because of his passing ability. So you have to play him completely different, whereas Joel, they're saying, Joel, pass the ball, do it, prove that you can even do that. And I think that's the hard part with Joel in this situation is he has to develop a different skill set, and he's gotten better at it in recent years, right? Passing the ball, finding the open guys. And to Brett's point right here, guys did miss shots. That is true. I remember the specific moment in Game 6 where DeAnthony Melton misses 3 straight threes in the third or fourth quarter, and that was kind of just the story of the game, right? They couldn't hit a shot in the fourth quarter, and the game got ran away from them. That I just wonder if that is stemming once again, not to say DeAnthony Melton didn't get enough shots, but you're asking him right now in this moment of Game 6 in the second round of the playoffs, you're up 3-2, can close out arguably the best team in the NBA as far as roster talent.
Yeah.
And now it's DeAnthony Melton's job to hit 3 threes in closing time. And I just don't know if that's fair, but at the same time, you see guys like Caleb Martin, you see guys like Gabe Vincent that are able to hit those shots, and they do hit those shots in a big moment. Is that because Jokic or Jimmy Butler, whatever the team, I was thinking of Denver Nuggets players, but Jimmy Butler, same thing. The Heat run offensive sets. They have guys cutting, screening constantly, not guys standing around in corners. So when you get to the playoffs, these guys are used to taking these shots. They're used to being asked.
Some of them are not used to. See, I think where you're wrong there, that also goes back to the culture aspect of everything.
Yeah.
Because, I talked about a lot about Daniel House Jr. this year, about how, first off, when he was signed, I thought he was a bum. I'm like, why? Whatever. Yeah. He lost his spot in the rotation. But then when he was called upon, he was ready to play. He didn't get ready. He was ready to play. But most of the Sixers, when they're called upon, they're not ready to play. You got Caleb Martin. You got Strush. You got Vincent. You got all these guys. Hell, look, was it game 1 that Aaron Gordon went off in the first quarter of that game for Denver? You know what I mean? When guys are called upon, when you have a great winning culture, they don't have to get ready. I think Duncan Robinson is the perfect example. Duncan Robinson, when was the last time he played before?
That's fair.
2 weeks ago. Like, he was completely gone and out of the rotation. Eric Spoelstra's like, yo, you're up. And what's he been doing? He's not just been knocking down shots. He's been backdoor cutting, playing defense to the best he can. And I think that's part of it's the X's and O's. Yes.
Yeah.
But part of it's also the culture that you set, that everybody's got to be ready. I don't know if you pay attention to the back end of the bench, but you look at Furkan Korkmaz during timeouts and during warm-ups after the half. The guy looks like he was checked out on December 31st. Like, he didn't care to be here whatsoever. And that's the difference in the culture there. Getting ready or being ready at all times to make the shot when it's necessary. And I think both go hand in hand there.
I do agree. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was actually listening to the Ball podcast earlier today while I was working with Trill Bro Dude, and he said something very similar, because it's like, if you're DeAnthony Melton, or if you're even Tyrese Maxey at some points throughout a game, it's almost like they won't shoot the ball and take shots out of Joel's hands, because they're going to catch that side eye, whether it's from Joel not getting the touch on the possession, or it's Doc Rivers, wanting to run the ball and run the offense through Joel Embiid. So it's like they're out there playing timid. And the reason that has to be a thing, it's like you said, it's a mixture of all of it put together. That has to be a thing, because we constantly see guys come in to Philadelphia, and whatever it is that they do well, they stop doing it for whatever reason, right? It's almost like they're getting pigeonholed into this role. And it's funny because Doc hit on that so much throughout the regular season, and we were thinking like it's such a good thing that these guys should know their role. But when their role is minimized like it is in the regular season and you get to the playoffs and now it's maximized, that is not what you want, right? And to your Duncan Robinson point, I think that's from his belief in his coach trusting him. He knows that I might get on the floor tonight and I got to hit shots. That's him knowing that his coach believes in him, trusts him.
Even if you haven't played, for 20 straight games, I'm going to be ready tonight. And I almost feel like, and I think it's kind of crazy to say this, that DeAnthony Melton came here from Memphis, and I had a lot of expectations and high hope for him. I loved his game because I watched a lot of, what happened there? Did I just go off the screen? Oh, my screen went black for a second. I don't know what happened.
No, you're fine. On my end, at least.
I think maybe because I'm just not touching the screen or moving my mouse around. Maybe it timed out. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, DeAnthony Melton came here. I watched a lot of Melton because I watch a lot of Grizzlies because I don't know if I still am a John Morant fan. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with John Morant there. But I remember tuning into Memphis Grizzlies games last year, and when John Morant was out with an injury, Melton was starting. I'm like, I like this kid. This kid's got potential. Yeah. And I almost feel like John Morant, big picture, was better early in the season before the culture really sunk into his blood, and he caught on. And as the season went on, he became content because that's what the rest of this team was. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's how I felt, that the culture kind of corrupted him as the season went on. And by the time the playoffs came around, he was just another Sixer, just coming up disappointing at the biggest moment.
Yeah, I completely agree with it. And it's happened with a bunch of guys right now. There was times, even with Seth Curry, right? He was one of the guys that came in and had career year with the Sixers. Absolutely. But there were still those moments where he pump fakes at the three-point line with a wide open shot. And you're like, well, why is he doing that, right? And it brings me back to this point every time. But looking at some of the comments here. So Marshawn Lynch says he thinks Joel has a 2011 Dirk Nowitzki run in him to deliver us a chip. Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing, right? And you have to ask yourself, what is it inside of Joel where he looks like he's not ready to play in Game 6 and Game 7? Like, these are the biggest games of his career. And I just have to wonder in my head, like, what is he doing to prepare for this game? Like, how is he getting mentally prepared? What are these conversations with the coaching staff looking like? Like, what are they being directed to do at practice? So I think that's why it is a breath of fresh air, because you do know, like you said about Nick Nurse earlier, he's going to come in and he's going to hold guys accountable, right? Or something's going to look really off. He's not going to look like himself if he's not holding guys accountable. And I believe it was Marshawn Lynch that said it earlier as well. It's like PJ Tucker corrected some of the accountability with Joel in one game. Does he have to go out there and scream in his face on national television every single game? I mean, if that's what you got to do, that's probably the coach's job. But nonetheless, you shouldn't have to do that for a superstar NBA player.
Yeah, for an MVP, that should
right. Is it an MVP, literally?
Yeah, literally an MVP.
But yeah, Brett, your point is valid. I've seen it in the comments here. They need help from the supporting cast as well. They need a better supporting cast. That supporting cast needs to be more involved in the regular season to get comfortable. But nonetheless, it's a full team thing here. What do you think about Marshawn Lynch's proposition, trading DeAnthony Melton for a Norman Powell, a wing defender?
I mean, it's another one. I'm not ready to give up. How old's Norman Powell at this point? He's been around a little bit, right? I'm not ready. I'm not ready to give up on Melton, basically.
27, 28.
He's 23, 24 years old, Melton.
Yeah.
Young. Nick Nurse has developed young players before. Once he sinks his teeth into young guys, I see a lot of potential in a lot of the young guys under Nick Nurse. And I'm not ready to give up on Melton just yet because of his age. Norm Powell on this team, I think would make we severely lack defensive wing players on this team.
Yeah,
I would love to get him in here, sure, but I'm not ready to give up on Melton to get Norm Powell in here. I don't want all of Nick Nurse's guys, in here. I know it's a hot name to come here. Look, this is not the Houston Rockets, thing all over again, just with the Toronto Raptors. I don't want to do that. I want to see what Nick Nurse can do with different names in here.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree there. Just trying to catch up in the comments here. Doc. Yeah, let's see what everybody's saying here. Doc put people on the bench for months at a time, didn't try anything during the year. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Yeah, not only will Nick Nurse lay oh my goodness, comments are getting out of control. Not only will Nick Nurse will he lay it on his team in the film room and at post pressers, but he's not going to be afraid to try new things as well. Right. And I think that's one of the biggest things that you've seen from Nick Nurse throughout his time as a head coach. Let's get to the next segment because we've been kind of stuck in no man's land.
I don't have to go to work at this point. Like the morning show has to end at a hard time because I got to get to work. You know, this I can go till tip off. I don't really care.
Exactly. Until we get to the NBA Finals game time. But nonetheless, let's talk about James Harden, man. Let's talk about the other beard in Philadelphia, James Harden. Where are you at with James Harden, man?
All right, so it's complicated. I'm going to try to do it as quickly as possible. For those watching that don't watch my morning show, Trade in the AM, I've talked a lot of James Harden over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah,
and there's what I think should be done. There's what I would do, and what I think the Sixers will do. So, ideally, me personally, I would do what I call a pause year. I would let Harden walk. Just lose him. I know it doesn't clear up cap space. You can't trade him to Houston necessarily because they don't have to because they've got the cap space to say, just sign him outright. So there's no negotiating power there to sign and trade. I'm okay with the term pause year, which is taking a step back to take 2 steps forward. You let Harden walk, you trade Harris for whatever, and then go in 2024, you've got cap space to actually sign people. That is what I would do. I would let James Harden walk. I would accept 44 or 45 wins, see what happens in the playoffs. That would be me. Develop Maxey, Melton, whoever are the restricted guys, Reed or McDaniels, whoever you bring back, Springer. That's what I would do. What if the Sixers want to win a championship, though? You have to find a way to replace James Harden. And is there someone you can realistically bring in right now that is going to replace 20-plus points, lead the league in assists, and play 35 minutes? Is there someone that can match James Harden's production, how bad it was or inconsistent it was? Is there someone you can bring in to do that? And if you want to win a championship next season, if you think the time is right to win a championship, you kind of got to find a way to convince James Harden to come back on a 1 or 2 year deal. I'm not giving James Harden a 4-year deal. There's no way, shape, or form to do it. Now, I think Daryl Morey is strongly considering it. I think he is. But if you want that title next year, there aren't many better options. Like, I've gone through all these ideas, a way to get Kyrie here, Kawhi Leonard, all these other big stars. I've run through the gambit of all the guys that you could bring in here, but they're not realistic options trade-wise. So James Harden, if you want to win a title, you'll bring him back. And can you convince him to do another 1-and-1? Can you convince him? I don't know if you remember, there was like late in Kobe's career. Kobe was a free agent, and they couldn't afford to give him the max deal, but they were able to give him a 2-year and like way overpay him for 2 years.
Yeah.
I think they gave him like a 2-year, $80 million contract when $40 a year was way above a max deal. Is there a way, would you be comfortable giving James Harden a 2-year deal instead of $50 million a year he gets in the max deal? Give him $60 million a year. And just you're giving him 2 years, 120 instead of 4 years, 200. I'm okay with that. That's not what I would do. I would take the pause. I would let him walk. But if you want to win a title, you're not replacing James Harden with anybody marginally better than him, honestly, at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, one thing I'll say just as kind of a counter argument to that, I guess. What happens if you don't get those just incredibly terrible performances? Obviously, you don't get the 40-pointers either, right? Like maybe that's just a 20 and let's just say he gets his average numbers, right? 21 and 10, whatever. But maybe those other games he's not shooting, 3 for 17 or 4 for 22. Like maybe you're not having those horrific shooting nights where he can't finish at the rim, not getting any foul calls, right? Like those are the things that I wonder if you could just find
raise his floor up, but his ceiling comes down a little bit.
Exactly. Exactly. You just said it perfectly. You took the words out of my mouth because I couldn't.
I know. I've thought this before. We're so different, but yet, we think alike on a lot of things.
Literally. I did want to pull up Marshawn Lynch's comment here because I do agree with this. The momentum did shift after that flagrant foul. It's like the Sixers couldn't make a shot. And then you throw in the whole Maxey debacle with the free throws. That was really weird. But I'm not going to give the Sixers any excuses here, honestly. They just blew that one, to simply put it.
But to your point, like if you get that lower ceiling but higher floor on James Harden,
yeah,
you can win an NBA. And it goes to the point that I've brought up a few times that Joel Embiid's got his MVP trophy, so I don't give a crap about load management anymore. Whoever you're here, I had spent a whole show talking Kawhi Leonard to the Sixers last week, and they're like, well, he only plays 60 games. I'm like, I don't care if Joel Embiid plays 60 games. I don't care if Kawhi Leonard comes here and plays 55 games. I don't care if James Harden stays and only plays 55 games. Yeah. As long as they're healthy. You're seeing this playoffs. What is Miami? An 8-9 seed? And they're playing for the chip right now. You saw the Lakers as the 7 or 8 seed. They made it to the Western Conference Finals.
Yep.
I'm not saying the regular season is meaningless, but I'm saying your seeding in the regular season is meaningless.
Yeah.
So
just need to get in.
If you win 44 games and are healthy, would you rather 44 games and you're healthy and be the 7 seed? Or would you rather 52 wins, the 2 seed, but Joel Embiid and James Harden are washed by playoff time? So I don't care. So I get what you're saying and asking, and I'm okay with it as long as he's healthy for the playoffs. As long as you're protecting the elite players for when it really matters.
Yeah, no, that's something I agree with as well. And to your point earlier about taking that pause year, maybe you win 44, 45 games, you still make the playoffs, get in, maybe it's even the play-in for all we know. It's hard to say at this point with the offseason not technically starting yet. But I look at Tyrese Maxey for one. He's had an uptick in production each year. He's gotten significantly better, like not just better. It's very similar to Jalen Hurts. I've put them in the same conversation as far as their work ethic. Maybe not talent just yet, but work ethic. And, you just know Maxey's going to get in the gym, work on his half-court offense, right? Work on his ball handling, work on his defense and all the areas that he is lacking. And I think you could get a better version of Tyrese Maxey next year. And with that being said, and to the point of maybe a person with a higher floor and a lower ceiling, maybe once you get to the playoffs, you look at the Miami Heat, what they're doing it with. It's more about the fit of players. It's more about the buy-in of players. It's more about the coaching and the culture than it is about the names. Yeah. And I think that's what we're looking at right now. We got to just trust. I hate to even say trust anything anymore. It feels out of place because it's hard to trust anything. But one thing I do trust is Tyrese Maxey getting better, and that's from. Was
it you or was it somebody else that's big on basketball on Twitter that put it out there that like if he takes at his percentage 3 more 3-point shots a game or 4 more 3-point shots a game, what that would like if you just find a way to keep him more active in the game. Yeah. He shot over 40% from 3. You add 4 more shots a game to his usage. We're winning games even more. You know what I mean? So, I think that Tyrese Maxey, and of course, everyone's going to say because of Nick Nurse and, his development of players and stuff like that, his ability to do that he's going to get better, Tyrese Maxey. Yeah. Don't forget that Tyrese Maxey is only 22 years old. Exactly. Everyone already puts him at this star. Like, I always talk about, you got to find the next superstar before they're the superstar.
Yeah.
We might already have that person in Tyrese Maxey because we're already considering him a star, but he could get so much better because he's already been good in 2 full years starting, and as a 22-year-old, the sky is the limit for Tyrese Maxey.
It's funny because I was just going to ask you, what is Tyrese Maxey's ceiling after you see something like this? Because to your point, what you just brought up, like the more volume for him, right? Like more shots in general. Yeah. I think not only more shots, but you can move him around. He's so quick, Phil, and you know this. You can move him around similar to a Steph Curry in an offense. And I'm not saying he is Steph Curry. I'm not ever going to say that. There's nobody that's really ever going to touch Steph Curry from a shooting perspective, at least in my sights right now, right? But you can use them in a similar manner. You can use him in a similar manner that you use, say, a a Klay Thompson running around the court off screens and coming up by the three-point line. There's no reason that you can't run that with Tyrese Maxey. He's a guy that can shoot without taking a dribble, right? He can shoot spot ups. He can shoot around the screen off the dribble. He can shoot step back threes. He can shoot it just about any way you want from the three-point line. So give him more volume. Maybe you get him up to 10 three-pointers per game.
So
and now he's looking like a different caliber player.
I'm going to pose a question as my answer to Tyrese Maxey to you to get your thoughts. I have two things with Tyrese Maxey. One, can he be a 25 to 27 point a game scorer in the NBA? And two, are you scared? Because like it's a bad comparison, but I'm just talking on pure speed, athleticism, and ability to get to the rim. Mm-hmm. He reminds me of a young Derrick Rose. He's a totally different player than Derrick Rose. But when Derrick Rose, before he blew out his knees 100 times, he was so fast. I had said when he was a rookie, I'd never seen a kid get to the rim as quickly as him. And I see that with Tyrese Maxey. Yeah. Are you concerned with the reckless style that he plays getting to the rim? That is his window of success smaller because he falls just as much as Joel Embiid does. He takes his size. He takes a lot of hits. Yeah. So can Tyrese Maxey average 25 to 27 points a game? And B, can he do it long term? There are the two questions you have to answer about Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah, and I think the answer to your question, I do think he can. I think he can average north of 25 points per game in a season. I think it comes down to him improving as a ball handler and specifically in half-court sets. I think that's just – and maybe that's just, once again, what we were talking about earlier, not having the keys, right? Not feeling comfortable, not feeling the freedom of having the ball in his hands to do what he wants on offense. So I think if you give him that freedom and he improves, obviously, ball handling, facilitating, and just the half-court offensive measures all together, I think, yes, you can get him up to over 25 points. You say Derrick Rose, I think that's a good comparison, although Maxey
just on the speed.
The speed. He's obviously a better shooter than Derrick Rose was from that standpoint. The comparison I threw out there the other day, because I saw this tweet going around, what's your ceiling for Tyrese Maxey? I for some reason, my mind goes to Donovan Mitchell. I take that out because Donovan Mitchell's so athletic. He can dunk on people. Like, he's a freak, right? So I'm not going to give him that title of Donovan Mitchell, although I did throw it out there. Right. I think the more realistic answer is a Jamal Murray. You watch what Jamal Murray has done for this Denver Nuggets team. He's a great shooter. He can get hot from the three and win you games. And I think that's what Tyrese Maxey is capable of as well. But you also see him with the ability to finish at the rim. And that's something that Jamal Murray, maybe not as well since he came back from the injury, but that's something especially before the injury. You saw some crazy finishes from him around
the names we just compared him to, Jamal Murray, Derrick Rose. What have they both had?
Injuries. Yeah.
Injuries. And that's my – if you put him up to that 25-point per game clip, 27-point game clip, you take that pause year and he's your leading shot getter. Can he stay healthy for a full year? Because those bumps and bruises and the banging and the taking hard fouls, I mean, it adds up. It really does. So it's something that's been percolating in my head for a long time now.
And another reason why I'm kind of against bringing Harden back, and I like what Marshawn Lynch said here. Tyrese can average 25 a game, but he has to finish better at the rim. It's very true, and I think part of that is finishing through contact. Too much. These guys are complaining about calls, just acting soft. And I don't know. Obviously Joel does a lot of flopping, and he does his thing with the refs. But Harden does that stuff too, and he doesn't get the calls. And I think that's another reason why I'm comfortable just letting him go, because when you're not getting the calls, and mind you, he's coming from a reputation where you used to get every call. When you're not getting those calls, it completely disrupts your game, and then he starts to look disinterested. And in the playoffs, that's just going to happen. And I think what Marshawn Lynch is saying here is similar to that. You just got to go up and finish strong at the rim, and that will come with time and growth, right? But I think that's fair to say the injuries would be a concern just with the way he falls, right? He injured his foot this season. That happened. And it gets lost in the mix of everything that transpired this season because you had so many injuries. But he literally broke his foot coming down, fast break and landing incorrectly. So it is something to be concerned about. Let me ask you this. I can't even get it out without laughing. What did you think of Joe Giglio's proposition to trade Tyrese Maxey for LeBron James?
I saw it. I ignored it. I saw it, but I ignored it. Look, we've had, I think me and you have been doing shows now for 3 years, and we've been talking about trading players and who should we trade for years. I'm not trading Tyrese Maxey for LeBron James. Yeah. I'm trading him for Kawhi Leonard. If you think you can win a title, I'm trading him for, I know it's an unpopular choice, but I'm doing it. But no, realistically speaking, I'm not trading Maxey for anybody. Would LeBron James be fun? I think the reason why Joe Giglio or whatever his name is, I don't even know how to say his name. I think the reason why he said that was because he doesn't think this incarnation of the Sixers, and I mean the Joel Embiid-led Sixers, will ever win a title. So if you go get LeBron James, at least we're going to have fun for a year. And I think that's why he's saying that. And if you think of it just solely on that aspect, this team's never going to win. Let's just have fun for a year. Yeah, you're going to have fun watching LeBron James and Joel Embiid play every night.
Absolutely.
It would be fun. The Wells Fargo Center would be fun if we had LeBron James down there. So,
absolutely.
I don't know. It's still a stupid idea.
No, I'm with you, though. I don't think I'm trading Maxey. I've even moved to the stance where I'm probably not trading him for somebody 30 years old and over, right? Like, I'm not going up that hill. Kawhi, obviously, if you go out and you get Kawhi, I don't think anybody's going to sit here and be like, maybe they would, though. Maxey is young. At the end of the day, it is youth, and he is that light at the end of the tunnel. We always talk about that with, like, Philly sports, I feel like, in the last couple of years. That light at the end of the tunnel is Tyrese Maxey. The future is Tyrese Maxey as of right now, right? And you look at what Marshawn Lynch said here, free Maxey. Look at what Jalen Brunson did once he left Luka's shadows.
Great point.
Jalen Brunson is a different breed. We know that, though. We know that, and obviously him coming from Villanova, but Maxey seems to have that makeup, right? Like that just pure hooper is what I like to call it, because he doesn't do it for the money. He doesn't do it for the cameras. He just likes to hoop, man. And I think when you have guys like that, that's when you get into real basketball, right? It's interesting to think about Tyrese Maxey, because I think there's some people that, think like us, the sky is the limit. There's some people that put him into this box of he's just a sixth man. He's just a flash scorer, right? Like a microwave, right? I don't think that's Tyrese Maxey. I think he can be one of your top two guys. I'm hoping that he can be your number one guy, maybe not for an entire season, but like we said earlier, just in those huge moments.
Would you trade him? Would you trade him for Kyrie Irving? Would you trade him for Jaylen Brown?
Jaylen Brown, I would trade him for. I would.
Even though Jaylen Brown just came up small.
I know. Hey, I have to walk that back a little bit.
I saw you back up there a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm just giving you other names that people have been giving me. Would you trade him for this guy? These are names that get brought up to me. Would you trade him for Kawhi? Would you trade him for Jaylen Brown? Would you trade him for Kyrie? I still firmly believe 100% the best course of action is to pause. Yeah. Just run next year with Max Embiid, whatever, develop some young players, and then look at the free agent market in 2024. Yeah. That's still the best option. But nobody's going to be content. Everybody talks about this Joel Embiid championship window, which honestly, I don't even care about that phrase anymore. I just want to have a competitive team and win a title. I don't care if Joel's here or not, even to an extent. Yeah. Just pause, wait, see what Nurse can do with these young guys, and then let's reevaluate in 12 months.
I love what you said there, because it's exactly where I'm at, Phil. It's not that I don't care about Embiid or don't want him to succeed. I want him to succeed because he is on the Philadelphia 76ers. Right. And I think this season, and this might have been my breaking point, maybe it's the tipping point or whatever you want to call it, but it's no longer about Joel's window. It's about the Sixers and what's best for them long term. Right. Maybe not just long term, maybe short term as well over the next 2 to 3 years. But you do have to keep the next 10 years in mind when it's looking as if Joel might not be that guy. We talk about championship windows. Well, it doesn't work without your main guy showing up each and every night in the playoffs. And that's something that Joel, whether it's injuries, whatever the case may be, it just hasn't happened. So it's a cause for hesitation there, and I think that's why.
Are you even remotely considering Joel Embiid?
What'd you say?
Are you even remotely considering trading Joel Embiid? I mean, think of it this way. Let me just propose a situation to you.
Yeah, that's better.
Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat losing 5 or 6 to the Denver Nuggets. They still don't get that title. Jimmy Buckets calls Joel and says, yo, force your way to Miami if you can. Or Miami calls and says, hey, Jimmy wants Joel. What would it take to get Joel away and bring him into Miami? Like, you're going to get a haul. Anybody that says you can't trade Joel Embiid because he's an MVP, you're going to get a haul. If you traded him, you would get a haul.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still not doing it. I'm still pausing and waiting a year to see what happens. But if a team like Miami called and said, yo, you can have Tyler Hero, you can have Bam, you can have Duncan, you can have 4 first-round picks, whatever it may be, all unprotected. Are you doing it?
No, because you're not getting a star back. That's the main thing that it comes down to, because while I'm thinking through it, Bam's having a great playoff stretch. Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero hasn't played, but whatever. He's had good times, right? Whatever you want to say about him.
Overrated.
None of those guys are stars, and as soon as they would get to Philadelphia, they would look like shells of themselves. That's my true belief, and that's what I just had to break it down to there. I think I said it, and I'm not going to list out all the guys that I would be willingly open to trading Joel for, but just to give a frame of mind, I immediately think to a guy like Shai Gilgeous, SGA from OKC. I don't think OKC is going to trade him, but that's exactly why I don't think Joel Embiid gets traded, because it takes a player like that in return in order to feel comfortable doing that. There's no comfort in that, getting a Bam and a Tyler and a Duncan Robinson back, even if you do get the 4 first.
You got Mr. Crockpot on Edge of Philly who proposed 2. One was getting Chet Holmgren and 7 first-round draft picks for Joel Embiid. He also proposed San Antonio and getting the number of overall one overall pick.
That's what I would consider. I won't lie to you.
I mean, does that intrigue? Look, I'm not doing any of these trades.
Yeah.
And it's not going to happen. Joel Embiid, I don't know about you, but I'll say definitively on your show, Joel Embiid will not be traded at all this year. Zero doubt in my mind in that. But I just like to propose these, because if you're saying you're not going to win a title in the next year or two,
you
just start that, not rebuild process, but retool process. If you get 4 or 5 picks in the next 2 years, OKC, you get 7 picks, you're probably getting 4 picks in the next 2 years. You know, you could build a young core. Nick Nurse has developed talent. You'll have the cap space in 2 years to add to Maxey and Wemby or whoever else you get.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a thought process that goes through my head.
And it's fair. I think it's fair, because you sit here and you think, and I think that's something that, Daryl Morey and Nick Nurse, they have to sit down with Joel Embiid. They have to watch Joel Embiid practice, do whatever he does behind the scenes. And they have to decide if that's best for business, because you trade Joel Embiid and you do it for like a Miami package like that. Maybe, just maybe, it works out. Who knows? You get a bunch of pieces that you can fill in and you have a nice deep roster, but it's not over the top talent-wise, right? How are you going to sell tickets? And I think that's a big thing for Josh Harris, especially the owner of the Sixers. He's at the end of the day, he's going to sell some tickets with Joel Embiid and company. That's as simple as it gets. And I think that's another reason we can sit here and talk about it. I just don't see it happening unless Joel Embiid demands a trade. That's what will push it over the hump. And, there's been all the rumors, the Knicks rumors, right? Those come out every offseason with Joel. He's not going to the Knicks. There's no reason we would trade him to an in-division rival. I get it. If Joel Embiid wants to go, it doesn't matter. Not doing that, right? You can pick and choose. You can pick multiple places you want to go. And I promise you they won't send him to the Knicks for whatever piss poor offer that they want to give up there. So, yeah, I'm with you, man. It would take a special talent for me to come off Embiid right now, which is exactly why it won't happen, because nobody else is giving up that special talent either. I want to get to a guy that we shared common ground on for a long time, and that is Tobias Harris, right? Sixers fans, I mean, they've been begging for him to get traded since the day he signed that max contract. It feels like close to 4 years at this point that we've dealt with this. Where are you at with Tobias Harris? I'm gonna pull up some slides here. I got some mock trades for you because it's Sixers off season. What would it be without Tobias Harris mock trades? Um, before we get into Tobias Harris, I forgot about this one.
Mock trades, and then this comes up on the screen.
Zion Williamson is a wild fellow, and Phil, you know I'm a Duke guy, man, and my Duke boys are just they're putting me under the table, man, with some of the stuff that's going on with these guys. Between Kyrie and Zion Williamson, and then you have the guys like Jahlil Okafor who, failed the Sixers. You have guys like Jabari Parker that fell out of the league. This stuff is crazy. I put a screenshot of a group chat I'm in here because this is the response that I got when I sent it in there. Because I saw this, and there's a bunch of tweets from this Mariah Mills on Twitter. She is just going in. You can read it there. I'm not going to read it out loud on the show here because it's just nasty. But, man, my man Zion getting drugged through the mud by a porn star today.
Well, all I can say is the guy doesn't play basketball pretty much ever. So he's not scoring on the court. He's finding ways to score off the court, obviously. And in multiple – he's scoring off the court in multiple arenas at this point, basically.
Right. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So Marshawn Lynch chimes in. Hard pass on Zion. Yeah. Especially with drama. You don't need the drama, the toxicity from him. Does he even want to play basketball? You had to ask yourself during the playoffs or leading up to the playoffs at that point. Once you have to ask yourself that, we've been down this road with Ben Simmons. We don't need any of that. Brett says the only young stars that are maybe available right now are Zion and Ja, and Ja's obviously got the drama. Let me ask you that. Maybe not Joel, but maybe you can get Ja for super low right now with the trouble he's in. He's getting suspended for at least 30 games, apparently. Can you package Tobias Harris and whatever you need to package him with to get Ja Morant? And would you do that?
I'm doing it. If it's like I'm going to hope that Nick Nurse or Joel Embiid or something clicks in this young kid. Because first and foremost, if this young kid doesn't figure it out, like his career is going to end. God forbid something bad's going to happen. He's going to end up in jail, arrested. He's going to do something stupid. He needs out of Memphis. He needs a new set of friends, a new culture, a new thing. Just focus on basketball. And I don't care if I'm taking a pause year. If I can find a way to get Tobias out of here and Ja Morant here, could you imagine a Ja Morant Maxey backcourt?
Yeah.
I mean, it's scary.
That's how I feel. I know there's a lot of people that are down on him right now.
Let him spend his 30-game suspension, rehabbing his mental state, rehabbing what is important to him, and then let's see what happens.
Yeah,
that's the pause here right there. I'm doing it. I'm not hesitating. I'm taking that chance because us taking that chance is also hoping to we can call ourselves like good people. We're taking on the troubled soul to save their life. Yeah. We're doing good for the world.
I love it, man. I love it. I do. And then you can even take it a step further and bring in his buddy Dylan Brooks as a free agent. Now you got D-Melt. D-Melt would probably go in the trade if they ended up wanting to do that. But nonetheless, it's an interesting topic, man. Marshawn Lynch bringing back history from the past, man, and it's hurtful at this point. To still see this, right? It still floats around. Mikal Bridges still gets asked about it in podcasts, and we just have to hear it every time while he's wearing a Flyers hat who are all starting their rebuild, right? He's wearing a Flyers hat, let you know how diehard Philly he really is. Just to say he feels stabbed in the back because we traded him with draft night. You can't blame him for that.
I feel stabbed in the back still, man. It's been, 2-3 years?
Yeah.
I don't know. I saw somebody pose a question. What was the biggest mistake of the process error? Markelle Fultz, Jimmy Butler. And I'm like, it's the Jimmy Butler thing, realistically speaking.
Right.
Man, letting Bridges go, man. That's got to be up there. It's got to be so neck and neck with Jimmy Butler, really.
Yeah, no, it's such an interesting thought because, like you said, I know it gets talked about Tobias over Jimmy, that whole story, but I'm just not sure how true that really is, man. I think it's just more or less Tobias did get a contract, Jimmy didn't. It's not necessarily him over Jimmy. We didn't really have a choice in the matter, if I could guess, but looking back on it, you take Jimmy out of the equation, obviously. I think Mikal Bridges, because while I was a Jason Tatum guy, the Sixers weren't going to get him, right? The Celtics don't do that trade if they don't know that Tatum's falling to 3. So take that out of the equation as well. It's Mikal Bridges because he's right in your lap.
Yep.
He fell right into your lap. I remember looking at this draft board and where we were positioned. Was that the 10th pick in the draft? I may be confused.
10th or 12th, something like that.
10th or 12th.
It was the first range.
And I remember looking at Mikal Bridges at Villanova, and I was like, man, if he could just fall to the Sixers, because I didn't even think that he would be what he is on Brooklyn. And maybe he doesn't get there without going to Phoenix first and then going to Brooklyn and figuring it out there as well. But nonetheless, even coming out of college, he would have been a perfect role player on that Sixers team then. He would obviously be a perfect role player on the Sixers team now. And that's what hurts, because you sit here and you talk about it, right? A 6'7" wing, man. We got Jalen McDaniels. We were excited about that. It's a lengthy, athletic, young guy. You had somebody that's probably about 5 times better than him right now in Mikal Bridges right in your lap, and you trade him out of the building. You trade him away from his mother on top of it. I mean, it's just...
For a guy that's not even playing in the NBA.
Disgusting business, man.
I don't even know. It's
cringeworthy. It's cringeworthy, man. I swear. My mom chiming in here. Shout out to my mom for tuning in. She says Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard. Now, maybe obviously not Joel. You want Damian Lillard with Joel. Tyrese Maxey.
I would have done it 2 years ago. I'd have done it last year. I kind of feel like at this point,
the
Damian Lillard, the Bradley Beals, the Zach LaVines even fall into that category for me. I'm moving on. They're just, I mean, is Damian Lillard even a winner really at this point? Like, do you have to question whether he's no different than James Harden, honestly, at this point?
It's fair. Let me get this text message off the screen here. It's been up there for a while.
It's been up there for a while. I was wondering when you're going to change that
there. People probably think I'm a pervert, man. But
well,
let's look at some Tobias Harris trades here. Obviously, the writing's on the wall. They're going to try to move him now. Whether it's worth it or not, once you get to that point where you have a deal on the table, that's to be discussed, right? But nonetheless, we got to look at them. The first one I have on the board here for you, and I brought up the mock trader just for a transparency here. I know. I hate it too, Phil, but I don't know. I do have fun with. I shouldn't say I hate it. I have fun with it at times, but
it's good if you use it for the right things.
Yeah.
Which is if the salaries match.
Yeah, that's all I use it for.
It does not include draft picks and what other
Yeah.
stuff. You know, somebody could create like a new mock trade thing where they put values to draft picks too. That would be the ideal way to do this and all.
And I agree with that. And I think, you know, on all of these teams, discretion aside, you have to add draft compensation, right? If you're getting Levine, they're taking on a contract where Tobias is making the same amount or more than Levine. You're going to have to give them some type of draft compensation. You throw D-Melt on the end there, another incentive for taking on Tobias, right? You get a 24-year-old D-Melt. How do you feel about something like this for a Zach LaVine that would give you an instant shooting guard next to Tyrese Maxey?
Well, see, that's the thing is who's going to be your point guard in this situation?
Right.
So
similar-esque player.
I'm firmly in belief that either DeRozan or LaVine get moved from the Bulls. They don't want to keep that pair. But they also don't want to go into rebuild mode. So Tobias Harris in his 1-year contract is attractive. Is Melton enough? Like, I don't think if Zach LaVine is the one that gets traded, this is not enough.
This is not enough.
This would be enough for DeMar DeRozan, I think. And I think the contracts are similar, and I think that would work. But is DeAnthony Melton attractive enough? Because basically you're trading LaVine for Melton, and you're using Harris's contract. You know, they could even then turn Harris at the trade deadline into something else too. That's what you're doing. You're trading Zach LaVine for Melton. That's not enough. You would have to do this. You might have to throw Springer in there. You might have to throw something else in there. I don't know. The rights to Paul Reed.
I don't know. Might not do it.
And it still might not be enough because Zach LaVine's that type of a guy that a team that's on the cusp might want Zach LaVine. They might have draft picks to include that we don't have. And that's the problem with this trade here.
And see, the interesting thing, you have to wonder, this is where it comes down to Joel Embiid, and it's like, this is the MVP of the NBA, right? And why, like, is there no world where a star demands to get traded to the Sixers to play with Embiid? And the reason I say that is Levine, obviously, another player that's under Drew Hanlon. He's another guy that's training with Embiid regularly. And these guys never just look at each other and are like, hey, I want to play with you. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if Levine demands a trade to Philadelphia, maybe he can get there. Maybe not still, but it's just, I don't know. It's interesting, right?
But the question is, you always see stars that say, let's play together. Why do stars not say that? Like, Joel Embiid's buddy with Jason Tatum after the game. He's buddy with Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler hasn't ever, we joke about Miami being a trade destination, but has Jimmy Butler ever said, yo, I want Joel Embiid here in Miami?
Right.
Nobody ever says, I want to play with Joel Embiid.
Right.
Even James Harden, this was his third choice, James Harden. He wanted to go to Miami. He wanted to go to Brooklyn. And then he wanted to come to Philly.
Yeah.
Like,
it's
I don't understand it. I think it's something that's got to be dove into a little bit more, the why that is. But, yeah, I don't know.
Well, you know, it's funny. And while we're on the topic, it's funny because you look back and you think, oh, Harden blamed Doc Rivers after the loss in the playoffs, right? And so is it a Doc Rivers thing where it's, hey, you stop dribbling the ball, get it to Joel Embiid right now, right? And maybe that rubbed James the wrong way for him to come out and say the things he did about Doc Rivers. But maybe that's also the thought as well, is like, if I come into Philadelphia, I'm not going to be sitting here, Pat, trying to find Joel in the post 50 times a game. So I don't know if maybe that, just the open style of basketball that is played in today's era outside of Joel Embiid, really, right? With that just typical post-up center. Everybody else is playing freedom ball. They're getting out on break. They're getting out in transition. So you have to ask yourself, how much do you really want to play with that style of basketball? And how much does it even fit your style of basketball, right? Absolutely. You're looking at Zach LaVine, who's coming from a middling situation in Chicago. Let me demand a trade to go to a middling situation in Philadelphia, right? So I don't know. It's an interesting
I just don't think this works. Also, then with this situation, you would have the Bulls have to accept DeMar DeRozan
for
and
another
Tobias
year.
Harris.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Fair. Like, they're both guys that are just, they can't ball. Like they both do. They're different, but they're kind of similar.
They're
kind of just jump shooting guys that are out of time. They're not in the right era of basketball.
Yeah, that's fair. Marshall says, "Are we also selling our souls?" Hey, Marshall, whatever it takes, right? I might not have a soul left after 2017, quite honestly, when the Eagles won the Super Bowl. So, do I have anything to sell? I'm not sure, but you may be right. We might have to sell our souls to get Levine in a Sixers uniform.
Let's see what else you got on here.
Yeah, I think that's one where it would take them completely going into sell mode, right? They're selling everything, and then to your point, still, would they get a better offer? Probably. Let's take a look at this one. This is the DeMar DeRozan trade, right? So we take it to the next Chicago Bull, but then you also get a Sixers fan favorite for whatever reason, Andre Drummond in the deal as well. He was obviously the best backup center that you've had for Embiid so far in Embiid's career. What are our thoughts here?
I mean, I don't know. Like Drummond, I do this trade in a heartbeat. I honestly think we are losing Paul Reed this offseason. I'm really firmly believing that, because somebody's going to offer him a contract
in a bigger role,
with potential that we can't afford to match. I know he's restricted. We can match anything. We're not going to be able to match. Somebody's going to offer him a starting role and starting center money. So we need a backup center. Drummond would fit that bill, even though that kid from Europe supposedly is coming over. I can't even pronounce his name.
Petrusov or something like that.
Some foreign name that I don't know how to pronounce. But again, like, what is DeMar DeRozan in this situation bringing the team that's going to change much from what Tobias? He's smaller. He shoots a little bit better, but at least Tobias Harris does spot up threes.
Right.
He'll the corner.
That's my worry.
DeRozan won't shoot the three unless it's like forced upon him. So I don't know how I feel about this. Like, I also feel like you're going to have to throw something else in here. I really think something else has to be.
Take that money.
But I would do this. I just don't think it's a smart move. I would prefer Zach LaVine over DeRozan, honestly, at this point.
Absolutely. It's a better fit. And I think with DeMar DeRozan, it's like you bring him in, you're going to have to change a lot of other things, right? Like he can't start and PJ Tucker start. Like that can't be a thing. Not in my head, at least. There's other things, right? There's talk of bringing Jalen McDaniels back as a free agent. Maybe he's a starting caliber player for you in a pause year, like we said, right? He can't start next to DeMar DeRozan. They're similar as well whenever Jalen McDaniels is actually playing up to par. So interesting thought there. Andre Drummond, like you said, gives you the backup center, but DeMar DeRozan, does that really push the needle? And are you willing to give up maybe a Jaden Springer in this or a first-round pick, whatever the case may be? Let's go to the next one here. I think I got 4 total for us. You can go down a rabbit hole with these. This one is one of my more favorite ones. This is one I presented to you on your morning show this morning. And to, I believe it was Brett up here earlier. I'd love a Buddy Hield trade for Tobias. Need a guy not afraid to shoot and will shoot threes. Completely agree with that. In this deal, you get Buddy Hield, and then once again, maybe not the best backup center option, but it is a backup center option with experience. So you get Daniel Tice thrown in there as well.
I mean, I love this proposal. I think Buddy Hield, we've been talking about Buddy Hield to the Sixers for 2 or 3 years now. And if Indiana does this, Indiana is in a sort of a rebuild mode to an extent if they do this, because then that means they're not giving the Hield Tyler Halliburton, combo more than one season. They're doing this to then again flip Tobias Harris before the trade deadline for more draft compensation to then pair with Halliburton. But a player like Hield that could shoot 8 threes some games and 14 threes other games, we need a guy like that.
Yeah.
We do. That's why, bringing back Seth Curry is such an intriguing option this offseason, because we don't have 3-point shooters. Our best teams during the process era were, or at least the best chances were when we had Curry, when we had JJ Redick, Marco Bellinelli, guys that could shoot the three. We don't have them, and Buddy Hield would fit that role. I would do this in a heartbeat. Honestly, I really would.
Yeah, I agree. Marshawn Lynch chimes in here. Pacers trade is good, especially if we get a first-round pick and maybe Aaron Naismith. The one reason I think that the Pacers could ultimately do this is if they have Tyrese Halliburton, right? He's the guy that you build around. You put a Tobias Harris there. He does bring playoff experience. He brings a veteran leadership role. Maybe it's just for 1 year that he brings that experience and passes that on to Tyrese Halliburton and company. Yep. And maybe that can make a difference in their future. But once again, it's hard to quantify Tobias Harris's value right now because he's probably, very low on our totem poles after a 2-point showing in whatever game that was in the Boston series, right? He finished out the series decently, but it was, undermined by them losing. Then you have the 2-point performance earlier in the playoffs. And I think his value is super low for us. Whereas if he went to another team with a better fit that doesn't have a Joel Embiid in the middle of the floor on offense, maybe he's a better looking player. And I think that's always been the conversation that got misconstrued here during Tobias's time, is that it's not that Tobias is like this some piss poor player, right? He's a decent to good player in the NBA. He's on a bad contract and he's on a team that he's not a very good fit for. And I think that's where we're at. So maybe, just maybe, you can look at another team that might believe a little bit more in him. Let's go to the last one here. I believe the comment off the screen there. So this is an Atlanta Hawks trade. This I'll give credit to Trill Bro. Once again, was listening to the Ball podcast. He talked about this trade. I went to the trade machine just to see if it was financially possible. As you can see, it works. John Collins and DeAndre Hunter for Tobias Harris and DeAnthony Melton. Once again, DeAnthony Melton, I'm with you. He's not like the number one guy that I want to give up in a trade. He's not in the top 5 guys that I want to give up in a trade, right? You'd rather it be a guy like maybe Furkan Korkmaz or something, or if you could get away with giving up a Furkan and a Jaden Springer in this situation, right? Once again, DeAnthony Melton is that piece that you're looking at. You want him, right? That the Atlanta Hawks, they look at that. They have DeJounte Murray and Trae Young as their starters, and you bring DeAnthony Melton in off the bench. That can be their third guard. So it's interesting. What are your thoughts on this one?
All right. So first and foremost, I think this on paper it works, but I don't even think you have to give up Melton in this deal. It looks like Atlanta's kind of They're not sold on Trae Young anymore. There's rumors that he's going to get traded, or DeAndre Murray, might get traded, this offseason. There's a lot of rumors floating around. Did John Collins hit a wall this year? Or is he just not as good as we thought? Because John Collins got that big extension. John Collins wasn't good this year, at least to the standard that he was projecting he was going to play at. Yeah. So is John Collins even better than Tobias Harris at this point? He's got better potential because he's still younger. Am I out of line saying that John Collins might not be as good as we thought he was?
No, I don't think you're wrong there. I
don't watch
his numbers as we speak.
Not as but
14 points, 13 points per game last season. Played 71 games, shot 50% from the field, below 30%, 29% from the 3-point line. So you look at fit-wise, the only thing that is tantalizing about John Collins is the rebounding and the athleticism, right? He can finish dunks, which is something that we just haven't had anybody that can do, really, and especially Tobias Harris. So he would be better in that standpoint, but from a fit standpoint, he's not going to be able to play with PJ Tucker, for instance, right? Like, PJ Tucker's not a shooter. John Collins, obviously not a shooter. He wouldn't be able to play with him. DeAndre Hunter is interesting. Averaged 15 points, 4 rebounds last year. What are the shooting numbers, though? Because that's the key. 35% from the 3-point line. So that's passable. That's passable. And he's a lengthy guy. He's a wing defender. He's a perimeter defender type of guy that you could bring in. So it's interesting for that case. But once again, in these situations, these are still risks. You're trading a risk for a risk, except these risks have 4 and 5 year contracts left, right? So it's hard to.
Out of the 4 you presented, I like this the least, and I've got a few others that I've brought up. One you heard me talk about today that I like. So out of 7 possible trade proposals, that is the one I like the least.
Interesting.
Let me give you real quick. You don't have to go detailed into all of them. I'm going to throw a few at you.
Yeah.
The first one, really quickly. Money-wise, it works. Tobias Harris for Brandon Ingram. You probably got to throw Springer in there or Melton, a future second-round pick. You got to throw something else in there. But Brandon Ingram, a scoring 3, would fit on this team. So that's option 1. Option 2 that nobody liked other than me was financially it works. You probably got to throw Springer in. Colin Sexton and Lauri Markkanen from Utah. They both only have 2 years left. Sexton will have 2 years left on his deal. Markkanen has 1. They're trying to get off of Sexton's deal. They're trying to rebuild. If you throw Tobias and his expiring contract, maybe Springer, maybe McDaniels, somebody else like that. Or the one that I like the best for it is with Dallas, and that's Reggie Bullock, Maxi Kleber, and Bertans. You get 3 guys you get 3 role guys. And for Tobias Harris alone, who I think Tobias has some connections with some of Dallas somehow. I'm not sure why or how. I think it works. And you get Reggie Bullock, you can start. You get your backup big in Kleber. You get Bertans as a shooter off your bench, back into your bench, but whatever.
It's interesting.
Do any of those 3 deals intrigue you whatsoever?
So the one you like the most is interesting because truth is, if Harden walks, the Sixers are going to need bodies next year. That's what it's going to come down to financially. So to that point, it makes sense. What I would say I like the most out of it, I'm a Duke guy, so I'm going to say Brandon Ingram. And you talk about all of those options, that is the biggest star that you could probably get out of all the options that we've named so far. That's the best player that you could probably get. Interesting thought. Tobias next to Zion play. That's always a question. But next to Zion, I don't know if New Orleans is going to do that, but I would do that in a heartbeat.
You're going to have to do more with them. You're going to have to give them Springer. You're going to have to include something else there. But the money works, so you don't have to do much more.
What about for Jordan Poole? That's one that's been talked about a lot.
Heard that before. I just don't know if, as soon as they gave Jordan Poole that contract before the season started, I said it was a mistake.
Yeah.
I think Jordan Poole has potential. I think Jordan Poole could be a really good player, but I firmly believe he got the vote of confidence from Golden State only to keep his mouth shut because of the Draymond Green incident in practice.
Yeah.
I really firmly believe that. Yeah. I think he's good. If you can get Jordan Poole for Tobias, you're taking a leap of faith that he's good. You're getting off of Tobias Harris. I mean, it seems to make sense. I just don't know what Jordan Poole's ceiling is. I
Yeah.
really don't.
There was a conversation a while there where, and I think this season kind of silenced it in a sense because Jordan Poole just simply had a down season, especially in the playoffs.
He disappeared from certain games in the
He
playoffs.
He did. And, for a while there, especially the year before where the Golden State Warriors win the championship, there was a lot of comparisons between him and Tyrese Maxey and who's the better player, these two young guards, these two young scoring punches. Who is the better player? Right now, Tyrese Maxey seems to be the way more consistent player than Jordan Poole, but Jordan Poole does have a ton of upside when it comes to scoring. And I do agree with you. I think you get punched in your mouth on camera and it goes nationwide, you're going to be uncomfortable if that guy's still there. Like, that's as simple as it is. That's human nature. This comment here is interesting. Tobias and Melton for Siakam. See, the thing with Toronto, they have a ton of players that I want for just to start there. I mean, Gary Trent Jr. I would take Siakam in a heartbeat. OG Anunoby's probably out of the question because I know he was annoyed with Nick Nurse.
Right.
I'm thinking of Chris Boucher, Fred VanVleet, down the line. I just don't think the Raptors are going to do us any favors. You bring in Nick Nurse.
So I forget who brought this up, and I saw it. I talked about it on the show. There's a 3-team trade, and the Sixers end up with Boucher and Gary Trent out of it. All we're giving up in this deal is Tobias Harris and Furkan.
Yeah,
the Raptors get Harris, Simmons, some draft picks, and then the Blazers get Siakam, basically to pair with Dame Lillard. They get Furkan to balance out the money. I mean, Boucher and Gary Trent. Again, I don't want to become the Toronto Sixers. You know what I mean? We just complained about being the Philadelphia Rockets. I don't want to become the Toronto Sixers.
Yeah, no, I feel you there. And I'm similar in a sense. I think it's interesting because I posted that exact trade on TikTok, I think, and I got a lot of negative reception from Sixers fans because they don't believe in Chris Boucher, which I think he'd be an all right backup center option, right? He always kills us, so of course he would come here and not play up to par. Gary Trent Jr., obviously, I'm a fan of his, but he is, in a sense, one-dimensional as of right now, right? Like, he's a shooter. He can get his own shot sometimes, but sometimes it's also out of place when he gets his own shot. But this is where we're at, though, with Tobias Harris trades. Like, it's going to be a bunch of stuff where it's like on the edge of what we think. Maybe it's not even close. It could be anywhere and everywhere. Marshawn Lynch says Tobias for Wiggins. Maybe that's more realistic than Poole. Is that a better fit?
I don't know. I mean, at this point, what is Andrew Wiggins even at this point? You know,
he had a great last year when they won the championship, but this year he had personal issues and was off the court a lot.
Yeah, again, I'd almost rather, like, I'm all for trading Tobias and all these ideas. They're just ideas floating around. We all have our opinions on these guys. I'm almost okay even if he comes back on his last year of his deal.
It's one more year at this point.
It's one more year. Let's see what Nick Nurse can get out of Tobias Harris. Maybe he unlocks something with Tobias Harris. And then if he doesn't, is Tobias Harris more valuable right now, or is he more valuable at the trade deadline if he's playing well under Nick Nurse?
That's a fair point. I would say the latter. Yeah, I would say the latter.
And that's why I'm leaning. Unless you can get a great deal for Tobias Harris, why not keep? You need bodies if you lose Harden. But
I actually have one more for you. I actually have one more here in my notes for you.
I've got like 40 more here. We
probably have the same one. Gordon Hayward and Cody Martin for Tobias Harris and just Tobias Harris. Apparently the money works there. I don't know if Charlotte will do that, obviously.
Somebody else brought up to me, I don't know if it was one of my employees or my brother brought up Gordon Hayward the other day. And I'm just like, really? Do we really want him? Like, I don't know. Maybe I didn't watch enough Charlotte this year. Like, give me Gordon Hayward from 5 years ago before he hurt himself, maybe. But I don't know. Like, does that make you really that much better? You get two bodies for one, but does it make you better? I don't know. Again, maybe my bias, because I'm a Tobias Harris fan, comes into play. I'm doing the Dallas deal before that. I'm doing the Utah Jazz deal before that. I think people are sleeping on Colin Sexton and Lauri Markkanen. a stretch four that could shoot the three.
Yeah. I forgot that deal. But yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not touching Charlotte right now.
I would do the Utah deal as well. I know I didn't talk on that one, but yeah, that's a no-brainer for me as well. Lauri Markkanen alone would be worth Tobias Harris.
Absolutely,
obviously.
Yeah. He's what we need in that position that Tobias Harris fills.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with Gordon Hayward, to your question, he does. If Harden walked, at least he brings somewhat of a ball handling perspective and a facilitate. But still, once again, these are what we're looking at. This is where we were at as Sixers fans. Tobias Harris mock trades. Before I get you out of here, Phil, I got two more questions for you. We can go through these pretty quick. Firstly, who do you have tonight in the Nuggets and Heat matchup, Game 3? And then to kind of go along with that, if you want to, what is your prediction for the series as a whole? Who do you have winning the championship?
I predicted the series would end in 5, and Denver would win. I thought there was even a chance that Miami got swept in this series. I thought their best chance was Game 1, catch Denver sleeping after 9 days off. Danny Ainge always fleeces us for sure. Look, I love what Miami did in Game 2. I love their fight that they put up. I just think Denver's more talented. They're a better team, top to bottom. You're not going to get great performances every night from Martin or Struss or Bam. And they're just not. I got Denver winning tonight. I've already made multiple bets on tonight's game. I know I took the boost. I forget what the boost was.
Jamal Murray and Jimmy Butler, 20-plus points.
Yeah, I went out on a limb, and I forget. I didn't write down my bets for tonight. Whatever the line was, I went and took the first plus money on. So I think what was Denver favored by 2.5?
2.5 earlier, 3.5 now.
3.5 at plus 110. I think Denver wins this game by 5 or 6. Yeah. I think the over hits. I think it's another 219, 220. Maybe after Game 2, maybe Miami wins a second game in this series. But I still firmly believe that Denver is far superior of a team. Jokic is playing out of his mind. We talked about Spoelstra and his culture. Malone does not get enough credit for what he's done in Denver. I think the world is seeing, well, not as many people that watch the NBA Finals, because I don't know what the ratings are, but I would assume that Denver is not a ratings draw. But the world that is watching is seeing what Denver really is all about.
Yeah.
Denver wins tonight, maybe even by 10, and I think they win the series in 5, maybe 6, but that's it.
Yeah, you talk about Denver, and I, just out of time constraint, I've not had a ton of time to talk about their finals run specifically. But to your point, that team is just stacked, man. I shouldn't even say stacked. It's just that they are the perfect fitting players amongst each other. I mean, from Aaron Gordon to KCP to Bruce Brown off the bench. I mean, they are stacked from that sense. You talk about chemistry and just the way they all fit together like a puzzle. Looking at this game tonight, do you believe in any sense of the, make Jokic score and that's the way you beat the Denver Nuggets, right? He's apparently games 40-plus points in the postseason. He's had 4 of them, and they're 0-4 in those games. Do you believe into that at all?
I don't know. I heard people talking about it. I didn't hear that specific stat that they're 0-4. Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a little bit something to it, because maybe he's best in the flow of the game when he's doing everything, when he's playing that point center position. But I don't know. I just don't think Bam can hang with Jokic enough. And I just don't think whether they make him score or make him do something else, I don't think there's a way that over a 7-game series that Denver can match up, or Miami can match up with Denver and stop him. Because even when they stop him and they kept them, they got him over 40 points, how close was Game 2? It wasn't like Miami blew them out of the arena or anything like that.
By 3. Yeah.
It was a close game. They barely won that game. So I don't think it matters what Miami does. Now, if you were saying a different team doing that, sure, maybe. But Miami, I don't think it matters what Miami does with or without Jokic, because I just don't think they're good enough.
You're going to need a Duncan Robinson 15-point quarter to be, you know what I mean? Like, that's the type of stuff.
You're going to need a miracle to beat them in this series.
4 threes in the first quarter for Max Strus in Game 2. I mean, there's a lot of different variables just for the Heat to score 111 points, right? So it is interesting in that sense. To end the show, Two more questions. One, is the convo over between Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic? Is that head-to-head battle, those conversations that we've had for several years now, is that over given what Jokic has done?
I mean, as an individual talent, no, the conversation is not over. Joel Embiid is just as good, if not sometimes some aspects of the game better than the Joker is. But I think as a leader of a team, the conversation is over because Jokic is carrying the team. He's doing whatever is necessary. He's taking a back seat when necessary. He's taking the step forward when necessary. So as a leader and as a person that's leading a franchise, the conversation is over. But in a straight head-to-head battle on who's a better basketball player, no, the conversation's not over. If anything, I still think Jokic is second to Joel Embiid in just pure talent standpoint.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. That's a good way to put it. I was gonna say the only way that it can get closer in that respect when it comes to Jokic, say as a leader or as the best player in the NBA overall, is if he does not win this series, right? Like if he loses this series to an 8 seed Miami Heat team, after you look at their road to the finals, an 8 seed, who was it that they played in the first round? I can't even remember. Minnesota. Yeah. Then a 7 seed in the LA Lakers, and then a 5 seed in the Phoenix Sun, or excuse me, Minnesota, 5 seed Suns, 7 seed Lakers in the Western Conference Finals, and now an 8 seed that he's playing in the NBA Finals. I'm on the same boat as you. I think that the Denver Nuggets are going to win this series, but that would be one way for Jokic to come down to earth a little bit compared to Joel. Final question: will the Sixers ever get out of the second round, Phil?
I mean, what's the when? Are we talking the next 50 years? Ever? Yeah. Look, I already said I hope I live to at least 80. I hope they win an NBA title by the time I'm 80. I'm 42, so in the next 38 years, if I live to 80, I hope they win an NBA championship in that time frame. Hopefully they win an NBA championship in that time frame. Look, will they get out of the second round with Joel Embiid?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's hard to say.
It's hard to say. It's what is he going to buy into as a player on this team? And I cannot say with a definitive yes that they will get out of the second round next year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. There's no way. If you just give stats here or there, the stats say he's not going to do it. So if we're doing it so far, so I don't know.
I will. I'll end the show on this. Joel Embiid has said for the last couple years that he calls his teammates out in public because he wants them to get better. I think if Joel decides next year that he wants to show that feeling on the court, that he wants his teammates to get better and that he wants to make his teammates better, then the Sixers can get out of the second round. But time will tell if that leadership characteristic comes
almost
into
like
Joel.
What you just said is you want to see what PJ Tucker did to Joel Embiid. You want Joel Embiid to do and act like that to the rest of his teammates. And if you're the MVP, you should.
Exactly. If you're the leader of the team, you have to demand more from your teammates. That's what being a leader does. That's what all leaders do around the world. So with that being said, thank you, Phil, for joining me. Thank you to everybody in the comments who's very active tonight. I loved it. Definitely love that. Make sure to hit the subscribe button on DSM Media. If you haven't already, hit a like on the video. Help us out there. But definitely thanks for coming on, Phil. Guys, if you're watching still, if you don't follow Phil, you probably do by now, if we're being honest. But if you don't, go give Phil a follow on Twitter at Beard A Knowledge. That's Beard A Knowledge on Twitter. And, of course, check out Trending in the AM. That's the daily morning show, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Philadelphia Sports Network. Definitely be sure to check that out. But, Phil, once again, thank you for coming on, my brother.
Appreciate it, my man. I you know me. DSM is home to me. Yeah, I love you guys, man.
I love it. Eagle season's coming. That's when we're really going to connect and start getting some content in. I know that for a fact. But nonetheless, Phil, have a great night. To all the viewers out there, have a great evening. Enjoy the NBA Finals showcase. Peace.